listening to Truth or Dare to Share by Ambitiously Intuitive.
Hello there. Welcome to episode 6 of Truth or Dare to Share by Ambitiously Intuitive. I'm going to have everybody introduce themselves. Hopefully you know us by now, starting with Raquel.
Hi, everyone. Raquel Keene. I'm back on episode 6 and excited to share my thoughts.
Michelle.
Thanks, Raquel. Thanks, Lacey. Michelle Renee here. I am looking forward to hearing everybody's thoughts and feelings on episode 6.
Kenyatta.
Hey, Kenyatta and Till here, and I'm super excited to talk about our topic today. It was a pivotal part of my childhood, and we'll get into it. We'll get into it.
Last but not least, Cynthia.
Hi all, I'm Cynthia. I can't wait to talk about Waiting to Exhale.
I'm glad I can exhale now that Cynthia said we're talking about waiting to exhale. And if I didn't say my name, it is Lacey, first name Kristen, but if you call me that, I won't respond to it. Yeah, so we're here to talk about waiting to exhale. Hopefully by now we've talked about a lot of different stories with a lot of different leading female characters. And when we were ruminating on which one to talk about next, this was a pretty easy decision because it is a well-loved movie by everybody that's on this call right now. So we're going to jump directly into Act 1 and hear people's reaction to seeing this, hopefully not for the first time, but maybe for the first time as an adult. So Cynthia, you want to kick us off?
So I loved the relationships between all the women. It was really great to see women working together to help and support one another. I think that was like the biggest thing for me, is I really loved to see that. And not just like giving like feedback also about like, you know, maybe what they need to change too, not just like what's going really well. So I love that.
Kenyatta, you said this is a core part of your childhood. Tell us your thoughts.
It was because my mother watched this movie a lot when I was a kid, so I seen it a lot in the 90s, but I just rewatched it recently, and I get it. I get the complete obsession that all my mom and my mom's friends, my aunties, they have this movie. And I think this movie is a beautiful example of sisterhood because all of these women are at completely different phases in life, but they can all resonate with each other through their relationships with men. So I don't think we get to see a lot of that on TV now. Typically on TV, the girl groups, they're all around the same age, but these women are different ages and they just share experiences. And it's really a beautiful movie.
Michelle.
Thank you. So this was my first time seeing it all together. So as an adult, Kenyatta said sisterhood 100%, because everything we ever go through, you can relate at different ages, or, you know, having a relationship, not having a relationship. I really, really enjoyed it. And I also read the book, so it was nice to see some of the differences. But yeah, I'm looking forward to see what you guys think.
Raquel, you mentioned while we were prepping for this call, you saw this a long time ago. Do you remember what your reaction was?
No, I mean, you know, hearing you all talk brought back some memories, because I remember thinking along the lines of like having female examples. You know, I was a young girl when I saw this, but this movie, I remember it stood out to me because they were navigating relationships, family dynamics. And I remember thinking like, okay, this is something that I'm going to need to kind of pay attention to for my future and have some sense of what's going on, as far as looking as a young girl watching this, thinking, okay, what's happening here with the dynamics and their relationships and some of their struggles and dramas and whatnot. So definitely a film based on what we're going to talk about today that I think resonates with our audience and with ourselves, because now in our own kind of adult versions, this movie came out in the 90s. It is interesting how it played a role in our lives, and then how we see it now as adults. So I'm going to definitely go back and watch this, as I'm sure some of our listeners are probably going to do as well. And it'll be interesting to see that dynamic from when I was, you know, very young to, you know, midlife now.
So in terms of my reaction, I remember watching it as a kid and not feeling emotionally tied to it for obvious reasons. Because I think everybody said when we were prepping for this, like, why were we allowed to see this as kids? But I guess maybe there were just less rules. There's a lot of movies I probably shouldn't have been able to see as a kid. Leprechaun and The Craft are the first two that come to mind. But staying on topic, I was inspired by Michelle and I watched the movie. And after she said that she enjoyed the Audible, I listened to it because I wanted to know how different it was. And it was the closest of most books and movies that I had really experienced. And this time around, I was really paying attention to what does the title of the movie actually mean? And I don't think I did or had the ability as a kid to do that type of analysis or symbolism. And I was paying attention to, is there ever a moment that any of them actually ever feel like they get to exhale when they're in a relationship? And just in listening to everybody's reaction, my reaction to your reaction, is that meta? Cynthia, will you ask Brandon? That's probably not meta. I still don't fully understand the word. I'm going to learn one day. Is that they were only really able to exhale with each other when they were together as friends because they kept waiting for it with all of these men. The first time with the four main characters, which I'm doing this by memory. Savannah at the beginning thought she could exhale with that dude who invited her to a New Year's Eve party. And then Robin like wanted to exhale with Michael, like the dude that she was dating from work. And then I don't think it seemed like Bernadine ever got a chance to until she met the guy towards the end of the movie or like got that letter from him. Because again, spoiler alert in every single one of these podcasts, it just needs to have that label. And then with Gloria, it was with the neighbor. Like, so they were looking for it or seeking it or were almost there, but they really only got it like at the end of the movie when they're celebrating New Year's together as a group. Like that's the only time I really saw them feeling secure. And that was what I was paying attention to or what I had the ability to pay attention to and seeing this for the probably the 20th time, but doing it with intention, I suppose. Anybody have anything to add before we jump directly into Act Two?
I forgot how much I love the 90s. Like
Can we talk about the style in the movie? Like these women were like effortlessly beautiful throughout the whole movie. And it wasn't too much. It was so, I don't know, the beauty in the 90s, everybody was just a bad bitch in the 90s without trying. It was iconic. I really want to go back to that.
That is so funny that you say that about their style because I was looking at the questions from ChatGPT. I had my own, but I just didn't feel like they were good enough. And one of the ones on here, so I will switch us into Act Two, which is question round, which is which character's wardrobe would you love to raid and why?
Oh,
Bernie for sure.
Those power suits she wore, yeah.
Oh my God, yeah. And her outfit she was wearing at Gloria's birthday party.
Robin, because it was just so sexy and fun.
The white dress, like that's what women are wearing now. We like all of the cutouts.
With the cutouts.
She did that first in her own way. And I was thinking about figuring out how to get that dress. That's why I literally chose to wear white today in honor of that one dress. So you obviously have my answer.
Also, Savannah's at New Year's.
Yeah. Savannah had a really like classic wardrobe. It was just we can't leave out Gloria because Gloria looked like everybody's mom in the 90s with those printed tops.
She also had the best earring game. She was really unapologetic about wearing really out there personality earrings, which I think I did more in college. And Raquel, you have talked about this in the last few times you've traveled together, that this return to wearing whatever your personality is. And I would say of all of them, she has the jewelry game down the best.
I think her earrings was a way to give her confidence because, you know, she struggled with her confidence throughout the whole film. So throughout the whole film, she did wear statement pieces.
That's a really good observation.
It's crazy because I would have never thought of that watching the movie, but now I realize why. he had the big
That's
It
why
makes
face.
me want to go rewatch it and pay attention to it.
This is why when rewatching stories that you love, like the characters don't change, but you do. And so every time you interact with it, you get to have this like net new, I don't know, realization.
Do you think this should be a movie that they remake?
No,
Oh,
Going
don't
back
touch it.
to iconic 90s.
Tamiana said nope.
Don't touch it. Like, who would even play these women?
I don't think I'd be able to do that casting choice. I wouldn't want anybody else.
Yes,
I don't want to see
want nobody
anybody
to touch
but
it.
Whitney playing Savannah. I can't. I wouldn't mind a modernization or something that was inspired by, like how they did, for example, and this is a really terrible metaphor, but 10 Things I Hate About You is about Taming of the Shrew, but it's a brand new story and it's just like in honor of. I wouldn't mind something being in honor of the story, but
Isn't this
not a
also a
complete redo.
series? Isn't it also a book series? So like the second book?
That's true. I don't even know what the second book is about.
I don't know either. I was wondering if it was, I might listen to it because I'm curious to see if it's like their relationships now or.
That's a good question.
I don't know if this is the second book, but upon a quick Google search in the series, there is Getting to Happy, which I wonder if that is the sequel book. Let's see. It is Getting to Happy, which was published in 2010. And
Whoa.
that's
A long
A
time
long
after.
time.
15 years later. Yeah.
I mean,
Interesting.
Terry McMillan had so much success with this, and then after this, I think it was what is it with Angela Bassett and how Stella got her groove back.
Oh,
I was about to say how Stella got her go back.
Yeah, that's what it was. But Terry McMillan was the it girl back in the 90s. Like her books were being passed around like a joint. Like this is what you did. You read it's Terry McMillan book.
I might have to read Getting to Happy. I wouldn't mind adding that to our backlog to find out what does happen to these women.
Yeah, that'd be really interesting. One thing I did want to talk about with this film, and I think it goes overlooked a lot, but recently on TikTok, a sound from this movie was trending, and it's Savannah's mom, and it's when Savannah's on the phone with her. She's like, "That's a good man, Savannah," and just, I was like, "Dang, can we just talk about how our mothers play a pivotal part in the relationships that we select?" Because obviously, he was not a good pick. He was married, right?
Yes.
Yeah, married
Yes.
with a kid.
Yeah, but he had a good job and he could be a provider. She's like, "That's a good man. You stick it out." And I'm like,
I
wonder how many
swear to
people-
God, I could close my eyes and it sounds really similar to the actress's voice.
because it was trending on TikTok, literally, and this sound was. And it's like all of these women on TikTok trends are like listing all the flaws about their husbands or partners or whatever. And then just like, "Oh, that's a good man." Like having to remind themselves.
Oh my gosh.
I'm going to ask a question on top of that, despite what's trending on TikTok, which it shows you, like, I'm a millennial that just waits for stuff to be on Reels. So it hasn't transferred over to Instagram Reels world. And one of them is, what is your favorite memorable line or quote from the movie? We know what Kenyatta's, or we know what the internet's is.
Oh yeah, I got another one because when I tell you, as a kid watching this movie, I was just we picked up on the comedic tones first because everything else was going over my head. But I got one. I'll wait my turn though.
I guess I'll go first. Oh
yeah.
Go. I was just gonna say when they're in the at the shop and they're doing their she's doing everyone's hair and she's like walking around and they're discussing what happened and they're talking about how Bernie was a mess at the Circle K and she was wearing her robe. I thought that was really funny.
Michelle, did you have one?
Not right now.
I didn't catch this, or I wouldn't have remembered this from it being a kid. But you know, we use the term, or the term thirsty is thrown out a lot in this day and age. And there's something that Savannah says in both in the book and in the movie. And I'm not going to be able to say it verbatim, but she says something like, there's a difference between being dehydrated and being thirsty. And I was like,
I don't remember.
it's something that sat with me because I get it. Like if you need to drink something metaphorically or literally, like it's okay to be thirsty. And she's like, but there's a difference between being dehydrated and being thirsty. Right. And this is the opening of the movie and her dealing with, and the way that they also talk about being, she's like, I'm a mid 30s or 35-year-old single woman. And these are women in the early 90s. And I'm thinking about now that it being whatever 2024, there's still stereotypes, less now than I think there were then. But can you imagine being in your 30s in the 90s and people looking down on you for your relationship status or choosing career or whatever the case may be? So those two stuck out with me. Kenyatta, what's your second one?
So it was more towards the end of the film, and I'm laughing because I still say this to this day, and it's when Robin's up on her balcony and Troy's supposed to come pick her up from the barbecue, and he's like in the vest with no shirt on underneath. He's like, you raggedy bitch. I do that to people, like I think you raggedy bitch. That always stuck with me. It was like the most hilarious scene in the film.
And he throws fruit at her and can't get it, and then she throws it back and she like gets him directly.
Yes,
perfect.
Her whole situation with Troy was like, wow, because they were at a party and he is running lines. And that is like for Black folks, if you do cocaine, you're a crackhead. Like there's no difference between cocaine and crack. Like it's all the same.
And she calls him that too.
Yes. And she's like, got a man I finally like, and he's a crackhead.
They all seem to, maybe this is I guess a question for each of you. Did you feel like certain relationships were stronger than others? Because it felt like they all tended to judge Robin more than the others. I mean, Cynthia brought up a good point whenever Bernadine was going through her shit, that they made comments about, oh, she was at the Circle K. And there's a character in the book that's not in the movie. Well, they're sort of, they have a little bit more of a role in the book, which are the other hairdressers that work with Gloria. And they were like, they love to gossip, just like most beauty salon has that stereotype. And so I felt like there was a little bit of judgment for Bernadine and her response to the divorce, but the majority of judgment usually went on Robin. And it's because it was hard to, because she is the one dating these men that you're like, girl, you're so much better than these guys that you're bringing home.
She also seemed younger too, I think, a bit.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I was gonna say. She was the youngest, and she was just already at a point that they've been through, like, so she was like early 20s, so she's in her whole phase, and she's round robin these dudes, literally. So they're like, girl, guess who Robin with this week? Like, it's easy to judge.
It's just living vicariously through her, that's all.
Yeah, because she was a baddie.
She also really owned it, though. I'll give her that she was very much doing what she wanted to do when she wanted to do it. And she also knew exactly what she wanted. Remember when Michael was like, what do you want? And then she went through the list. And again, I don't remember it verbatim, but she's like, I want to go out to dinner once a week, like somewhere nice. I want to have a house. And he's like, I can take you to dinner. Like, I have a house. And she's like, and I want to have kids. 1, maybe 2. Who knows? And she's like, you don't want a lot. She's like, but she was always very honest with these guys and with herself about what she wanted. It just took her a while to stick to her boundaries there towards the end, but she communicated it, which I appreciated. Cynthia,
yeah,
No, go ahead, Kenyatta.
No, I was just gonna say, I love how women back then found power within their sexualization.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you have this type of control over men, why not make your demands? If a man's willing to give you anything you ask for, why not put it all on the table?
Passion
Is
or
that a
power?
is that a question for us?
I'm saying, like, when did we get away from that? Like, I feel like women now are just so accepting of whatever they get, like they don't demand a lot of things from men anymore. I feel like back then women demanded what they want from the men that were seeking them.
How sexy is it for the man to ask the woman what she wants, though?
Oh, panty dropper. Even though Michael wasn't nobody type.
Oh, that scene was
He-
so funny.
My counter to that is I don't need to demand something of somebody that I can give myself. So, and I think, listen, there are two sides to this. Like I feel like in a few episodes, I was thinking about this more. We eventually plan to talk about Pride and Prejudice because that's talking about the 1800s and the 1900s. I don't remember exactly what century. I'll be sure to look it up before we talk about it. But you weren't actually in a place to demand anything at one point because it was really about like whose family matched with whose family. And then like, okay, let's say the 90s was like a revolutionary time because we're post the feminist movement where we're asking for the same wages. We couldn't even get a credit card in this country as a woman until the 1970s. So we had to accept whatever was handed to us. And then that puts women in a place of power when if you're able to give yourself something that they also can give you, then it's kind of like, well, what else do you have? Because I would say if there's anything that I demand, it's like, what are you bringing to the table that's better than my piece? Because I would say like, I'm good all on my own. And that's why I think Savannah showed that. Gloria raised the son by herself. They all realize, and that's why like, if you're able to be okay with yourself, then that person's just a bonus. I do think, Kenyatta, that like the pendulum swing did end up being like, oh man, if he just meets like the bare minimum, like I'll give him a chance. And so I think demand for me, I guess maybe sounds hyperbolic, but maybe that's some mere shit some work I need to do. Because I'm just like, you're competing with my piece. I don't need you to buy me shit. I don't need you to do anything for me. I would actually rather you want to do it and outweigh what I've got going on. But that's my own projection. That's my own shit.
I think it's more so expectations.
Great Expectations. Is that a book we need to add? I've never read it.
I never read that either.
Maybe we need to read it because I'll learn something about what Great Expectations look like. Right now, we're just learning to breathe. Who plays
the movie?
Yeah, it's Ethan Hawke and who's the woman? I want to say it's Gwyneth Paltrow.
We'll propose that
from the 90s
backlog.
too. It's in the 90s too.
I love that journey for us. But right now, just going back to the title, we're just learning to breathe. We haven't even gotten to Great Expectations. This is I've been holding my breath. I just want to let it go.
All this time? I think there's a relationship in this film, Waiting to Exhale, that wasn't so much relevant back then, but is very much so relevant today. And I think it's the one with Gloria and David, her ex-husband, Tariq's her son's dad, and how he's gay and how he has to come out and tell her that he's always been gay.
Yeah.
And that's why he couldn't pretend anymore. And how she was her self-confidence, I don't know if her self-confidence was low or she just loved him so much that she was okay with that. She just wanted somebody. And it's like, wow, like today, that's very much so a thing where you can date somebody and they'd be like, well, I'm bi. Are you okay with that? You have to be like, oh, you actually have to think about it now. But like back then in the 90s, it was very much so, hell no, like, go be what you like. I'm gonna find somebody else. Or there are a lot of
probably
men.
a lot more of it back then going on than people talked about.
Yeah, because men were afraid to come out. Like
I
people
remember
were afraid to come out
watching
back then.
there was a segment on Oprah again in the 90s. I don't think it was Jenny Jones. I'm pretty sure it was Oprah, but I was a Jenny Jones watcher. Uh, but I'm pretty sure this is on Oprah where they said like 1 in 10 men were going like poker games, and they called it on the down low.
Oh,
And
I
I didn't
remember
even know what
that.
that was. And I don't know if that statistic is true, but I would say that that storyline being included in this book and in this movie coming out in the early 90s, especially after the 80s, where there's a whole AIDS epidemic and targeting of the LGBTQ community on that particular subject, that this being included in the story is a revolutionary one. I definitely think now that there's much more liberty, still a lot of homophobia, but a lot more liberty to being open about being gender fluid and what your preferences are, be less likely to end up in that scenario. Not saying it can't happen, but I do think that
Yeah.
that was timely for the 90s.
And it was
Yeah, but
Gloria, right? She even corrects her son from like name calling the dad I think in the one scene. She's like, don't talk about him like that.
yeah,
Yeah.
because he called him a slur. And I'm so glad you said the word, because I try my best to keep up with all the terminology and stuff, but gender fluid, like I think gender fluid men are just as much in the regular dating pool as anybody else. And like when you're gender fluid, you have no preference. So it's like, how do you even, these are things that we have to think about now, like, okay, like maybe I need to open my mind a little bit more. I, I don't know. I'm a millennial. Okay. So
We're all just doing our best. Well,
I have
I'll
to
give
beat
somebody
out
this.
the old and accept the new and
I
mix it all.
admire when anybody, regardless of their gender association, communicates what they want. So that's the same thing, right? Robin coming out and
Mhm.
saying, "These are my standards" to Michael, or Gloria's husband coming out and being honest. A lot of these times in these stories, one of the most frustrating things as a viewer is when people have communication issues, and you're like, "Oh my gosh, just what's happening behind the scenes, and you want them to just tell them." But when people actually communicate their needs and their wants, it's like liberating for everybody. And I think that that's true both for men and women, um, and anybody regardless of their gender association.
Right.
Cynthia, I know you haven't gotten a word in, but I was going to ask you, because you usually come with a bunch of questions. Did you have any that you were really excited to ask the group?
I mean, most of the two questions that I wrote down were all about like friendship. So it's like basically it goes back to like this whole idea about how have female friendships impacted your life, and then also like for these characters, how were they able to like cope with all these challenges with the women supporting them? So go either way with that. Those were my two questions.
Raquel, not to put you on the spot, but you've been very patiently watching us
It's
go
been
back
good
and forth.
I mean, I would answer the first question about female support and how important that is, because I think this goes back to just the beginning of time, that women have always been in community with one another. And I think it's so incredibly important that we are very intentional with our girl groups, that we have people on that topic of friendships of other women that support us, that love us unconditionally, that want the best for us. And I can see how that's played a role in my life through the years. And it's also just it's nice to celebrate that in other women, and that other women have that. It's so important. So I think, in going back to the storyline, the story is about love. It's about overcoming adversity. It's about finding happiness in the pursuit of their own personal happiness, and their own like self-discovery and empowerment. And I think like that friendship through and through help them in all of those aspects. So that's what I would share on that question.
Anyone else on the subject of friendship and adversity?
Yeah.
I just think go ahead.
You sure?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, looking back, especially in my 30s, I don't like, how do I feel lost without having those female relationships? Because relating to females with, girlfriends, friends, best friends, like the expectations in a sisterhood group setting is so much different than it is in a relationship. Like you don't feel as much pressure. So like being able to share things is easier. Like we're all on our own journey. And like I got that from this movie. But like I don't know how I would get through a lot of the stuff in my 30s if I didn't have my friends. Like so I see that in the movie. Like they're all different ages and they literally helped each other get through. You had a tail wagging in your hair, Lacey. But they were there for each other. And like, I don't know, I feel that.
Kenyatta, you started to say something as well.
Yeah, I was just gonna say it's so important to have. It
Mhm.
is so, and I think you don't realize the importance of it because I have friends that I am very, very close to, but we live far away from each other. We don't talk every day. But if I'm mentally drowning or declining, I know I can reach out to these women.
Mm-hmm.
And it's never on anyone. She hasn't called me in 2 weeks, or I don't know nothing. It's like you pick up right where you left off. It's kind of
Mm-hmm.
like that. The Meredith Grey and Christina Yang effect. Your person, like you
Mm-hmm.
got to have your people. Like I don't think you can really survive without your people, and I feel sorry for people who don't have people. I want them to have people. Everybody needs people.
Mhm.
Yeah, because in the start of the movie, Savannah didn't even live in the same town. She moved
Mhm.
to Phoenix. And it's funny, Cynthia, you talk about adversity because I was thinking about the movie being set in Arizona because of Phoenix as somebody like rising from the ashes. And obviously, I'm really into the symbolism. It's what brings me a lot of joy when I read books or watch shows or watch movies, especially ones that I love. And that same point around seeing it again for the second or third or 10th time, you've changed, your perception has changed. And it doesn't surprise me that she moved. I think she moves from Denver to Phoenix, where they all go through some sort of metamorphosis. And to your point around friendships and overcoming adversity, I think of everybody on this call, even though Raquel, sometimes I tease you because you don't remember knowing me in our early years, but in all fairness, between Florida State and University of Florida, there was a lot of alcohol involved. So it's not that big of a deal. But almost everybody on this call I've known for more than 20 years. And to your point, Kenyatta, there were periods in time where like not everybody on this call talked to each other, or there are friends that are not on this conversation who I could say the exact same thing for, who have been there in the moments where I like felt like I was going through something and that I knew would be there for me. And I don't remember where I read this, but it said something to the effect of one of the reasons why friendships are so easy is because it can be love without condition. To that point, Kenyatta, about not being mad if you haven't talked to somebody in weeks or months and there's really no expectation. So it's like love without attachment. Not saying there isn't any attachment, but there's a greater connection as opposed to there being like this insecure attachment of like, how are we doing? Where are we? Which makes it a bit more liberating. Well, does anybody else have any thoughts or questions to ask the group before we move into the final question that exists in Act 3? I'm reflecting on ChatGPT while anybody else looks at their notes. I actually want to ask this one. It'll be the final one for me, only because it made me laugh. If the characters from Waiting to Exhale had their own podcast, what do you think they would discuss in each episode?
Sex.
I think here are my answers. I'm going to give mine rapid fire. I think Bernadine would end up starting that catering business. And I don't know if she would do a podcast. I think she would be starting an Instagram or some sort of social media or YouTube channel about creating the food, like what goes on behind the catering. Robin's having the baby, right? So I think that she would talk about like her pregnancy and like and raising a mother like as a single woman. But but she probably met some dude at like daycare, and now they probably have like a blended family. Gloria, her what to do when your son's out of the house?
She's got an Instagram for her handyman boyfriend.
Oh yeah, like what my man does to fix things, but yeah, something like that. And who are we missing? Oh, Savannah. I don't know.
She'd be producing it.
Yeah,
Right.
Savannah would be behind the scenes and editing the crazy things that these ladies said. Because she was the most reserved, wasn't she, of the four, wouldn't you say?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know.
Well,
I think Gloria may be the one with like the cooking show. Because
Yeah.
that scene where she's like listing off,
mm,
oh, Becca, I'm just cooking, ham house, cornbread, a little bit of ham. She's like,
Cornbread.
and I'm like, damn, like, can I come eat?
what do you think Bernadine would be talking about?
Oh, so I hate the podcast where the men sit around and talk about what women bring to the table and relationship expectations. I think Bernadine would be the
Shutting him
woman
down?
version. She would be
Oh,
that, but she would definitely be controversial on a podcast. Like
mm.
she is so outspoken, and I would love it. So
And also telling women what to do while they're still married and how
Mm.
to get things in order for themselves.
right,
Mm.
yeah,
I could see her giving advice. I hope that she just found peace. All of
yes,
them. Isn't that what exhaling? It's like exhaling is security and safety and peace. And again, I think that they found it with each other. It would be nice if they could do that in their romantic relationships as well.
Robin would definitely have an OnlyFans in my head. I'm just saying, in my head, she would. She would.
I hope that she's making 6-7 figures a month on her OnlyFans. I do. I
I'm
do.
for it, yes.
I hope she's owning it. Okay. Well, I'm gonna close this out with Act 3, which is actually playing Truth or Dare to Share, which we do introspection and answer the question, are we going to share a truth that's inspired by the story, bless you, I think, the story of these characters, or we dare to do something different or ask the question to ourselves, is there something that we could adjust based on the learning lessons from these folks, from Bernadine, Savannah, Gloria, and Robin, or any of the side characters if that suits your fancy. Does anybody want to go first? We usually go in alphabetical or backwards alphabetical. Does anybody feel so bold as to kick us off?
I will. It'd be truth. I'm gonna pick truth. So watching this movie, I realized that I am finally in a relationship where I can exhale,
Mm,
and I feel like I'm not as appreciative of it as I should be.
mm,
Because when you operate in independence for so long, it's very hard to exhale. It feels like suffocating at first. And I finally got to a point where I could exhale, and I guess this turns into a dare, but I just want to be more aware of it, more appreciative of it, and
mm.
enjoy it while I have it.
Love
Kenyatta, dare I
that.
say, you no longer have to exhale?
I see what you did there.
Yeah, I love that. I love that for you, Kenyatta. Cynthia, since you spoke up, would you like to go next?
I guess I would pick truth for this one. I think we don't always think about how important, well, I guess we do, but how important female friendships are in our lives and navigating that. And just that I really appreciate that. And also to go off of what Kenyatta said too, like, I think sometimes, I don't realize also what I have and to just be able to accept those things. So, yeah.
Love that. Raquel, on my screen, you're next to Cynthia, so I'm just going to you because of the linear element.
Sure. I would go with dare. And I love this theme of thinking introspectively about exhaling and a specifically relationship concept. I think I want to seek out essentially what Kenyatta and Cynthia said that they have, and that they want to appreciate more and just kind of reflect on. I think I want to dare myself to seek that out, and the importance of like a healthy, peaceful, romantic relationship with someone, and just being aware of just kind of what the movie points to in some of the scenes of the complexities of relationships and trust issues, heartbreak, infidelity, like a lot of disruption, a lot of turbulence. And I've all experienced that in my past. So it's just kind of thinking that all the women find peace, and that they find their joy and they find their healthy, happy relationship. Like that's what I want to dare for myself to find, and just call that out.
I love that journey for you. Michelle?
So I think I'm going to pick truth this time with how the movie sat with me right now. And what I took away, like settling for less than what you desire won't make you any happier. So for my truth, it's like letting my path run its course and accepting it, and making sure that I'm doing what I need to do to make myself happy. So I don't know, is that a truth and a dare combined, or is that
it's a trayer.
So I think I'm a trayer this time.
Well, you've all four of you have given me a lot to reflect on when it comes to gratitude, acceptance, and appreciation, both for romantic relationships and platonic ones. As I was listening, Kenyatta, to you talking about the relationship between Gloria and her ex, and then we went down this conversation around communicating what you want. This time around, I'm going to choose a dare, which is making sure that I'm doing that. There's a concept in sales in the business world called an upfront contract, which is essentially contract is an agreement, and an upfront is doing it at the beginning. And a lot of times, both in business and in personal relationships, people get frustrated when you have misset expectations. And it's usually when nobody on either side, like you get frustrated if they don't do something that you never asked them to do, and vice versa. And so I can't change other people's behavior, even though my type A tendencies thinks that I can sometimes. But I'm going to dare myself to make sure that I'm continuing to do that, to communicate my needs, regardless of what the relationship is setting. And also remind myself that this is easy, having this conversation with this group of folks, that I can exhale by just getting on the phone with any one of you. Call me, beat me when you want to reach me. Wrong show, wrong movie. Okay, well, I think that this wraps up episode 6. Thank you, folks, for listening. We look forward to seeing you on the next episode. You know the drill. Like, share, follow, comment. Anybody else have anything to add? Michelle kind of did one exhale breath.
Exhale.
Okay, so this is, if nobody's reminded you today, now's a good time to take a really good inhale and then exhale. And we will see you the next time. Thanks so much.
Bye.
You're listening to Truth or Dare to Share by Ambitiously Intuitive.